Dr. Modak, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce him. Dr. Prasad Modak is an alumnus of IIT Bombay and holds Doctor of Environmental Engineering from Asian Institute of Technology, AIT Bangkok. Dr. Modak was professor at the Center for Environmental Science and Engineering at the IIT Bombay between 1984 to 1995. Currently, he is back again with his alma mater as the adjunct professor at the Center for Technology Alternatives and in rural areas, Sitara. Since 1996, he runs a strategic consulting company called as Environment Management Center, EMC LLP, that focuses on sustainability. He is also founder director of eConnect Knowledge Foundation that works on building awareness and imparting training. In addition, Dr. Modak is Chief Sustainability Officer at ILNFS Limited and Dean of ILFS Academy for Applied Development. Dr. Modak has worked with almost all key UN, multilateral and bilateral developmental institutions in the world. Apart from Government of India and various state governments, he has been an advisor. He has given his advice to various governments of Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Mauritius, Thailand and Vietnam. He has been invited by several international agencies, public bodies, professional journals and governments to serve as a jury and reviewer. He has authored and executed more than 400 consulting reports and trained more than 6,000 professionals. One of them is me. He across the world on environmental policy, establishment and operation of environmental and social management systems and waste to resource management are some of his areas of interest and expertise. Apart from the above, he has been a true mentor and a guide to many, one of them being me. I welcome Dr. Modak to give his views and opinions on the topic.
Thank you, Swati, and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, Vaidya family, for instituting this series of lectures. I'm very also happy to see that the audience here is, I think if I'm right, architects, landscape architects, planners, and the topic is also what you have assigned is very interesting. I'm not going to speak about this project. I'm going to introduce how projects of such nature should be devised, and then at the end touch upon this project to make some observations. So it's going to be, in some sense, setting the scene, so to say, and then I'm sure the other speakers will go more specific on this project and give their opinions. My idea in this presentation is to present to you a environmental social management framework approach. And in many ways, this becomes an umbrella concept. And then we see how projects like the coastal road will fit in if there was indeed an environmental social management framework governing the investments happening in the infrastructure of this city. Next slide, please. When we talk about development projects, our intention is always good. We want to see something good to happen. We want something where there is going to be some benefit to the society, improvement in the quality of life of people. But although we have these intentions, good intentions, there's bound to be some environmental and social issues. And many of these, in few cases, are issues of concern. We got to deal with these issues. And their criticality could mean either we sometimes don't go with the project, or we influence the project, or we add a set of mitigatory measures to the project, or we undertake some enhancement measures so that we can address these environmental and social issues. Next slide. We also now realize that environmental social issues are indeed material. It's not something that it's the ethos, our interests to protect the environment is the driver, but we also see that there is an implication on economic terms when we want to deal with these environmental and social issues. And in some cases, the cost of the project, because we want to address these issues in the mitigatory activities, they cost more. And in some cases, we find that we cause, in some sense, damage to the environment, either during acquisition of land or undertaking construction, during operation, also closure. And these would have economic implications of restoration. And in some cases, the stakeholders object to the project. The projects do get delayed, and that leads to cost escalations. And there are cases also where projects have to be abandoned. That leads to a situation where the investor or developers, you find them getting affected. And it could be private sector, it could be government. But indeed, all these would mean that environmental social issues do have economic or material implications. Next slide, please. Now, one of the strategies we've been using for years is that we ask for environmental impact assessment, and that is in our system notified. We have a EIA notification, and that was in 1994, and subsequently you see several amendments being done, new processes getting introduced, and that requirement, we feel, is a good way to address the environmental and social impacts upfront. So before we clear the project, we want to ensure that these issues are properly identified and dealt with. Yeah. And you can make a, whenever I will pause, you can just keep skipping, right? No, they can just go back. The issue remains that when we talk about environmental impact assessment and the notification, to what extent do we address social issues, and do we have a good system to conduct social impact assessment? That's one question to look at. We also, apart from the EIA notification, have a huge canvas of different laws and regulations. And they cover water and air and waste, and we have zoning happening through the coastal regulatory zones. And then we have forests and wetlands and wildlife related rules and regulations. So it's really a lot of things put together when an environmental clearance gets granted. This is a fundamental question, that if I were to be compliant with the law and the requirements of rules and standards, is it sufficient? Does it then mean that if I were to be a compliant, is it an environmentally sound and socially acceptable project? So if I am a developer or a promoter, if I said I met laws of the land and I have got an environmental clearance, then there shouldn't be any question in the minds of people that I am doing something harmful to the environment or something which is not going to be socially acceptable. Do you believe? Is compliance enough? You don't. Then what's the effectiveness of compliance? If you say that being compliant is not good enough, what is the role of compliance? Anybody? Is it just a checklist, checkbox? That yes, I've met this rule, I've met so-and-so form is to be filled, I've done that. Let's keep this question in our mind as we go along today, that is compliance sufficient? Obviously, the answer is not, that it is not sufficient. We have that kind of a discomfort in our mind to accept that any project which comes to you, coastal zone road project, has got an environmental clearance, then why do we have this debate today? If there was enough wisdom and confidence in the judgment taken by the Environmental Clearance Committee, we don't need to sit here today and discuss this project. So surely something is not sufficient or not enough. One of the very important outcomes we get of the environmental impact assessment process is the environmental management plan. And that's the real meat of the entire exercise. And this environmental management plan spells out preventive and mitigative measures, not just mitigative, but preventive and mitigative measures, a well-placed monitoring plan, it estimates resources required, and importantly, it also looks at the delivery capacity of the institution in terms of offering training and capacity building, and then assigns roles and responsibilities. So put in the context of Coastal Road project, what is the capacity of the Municipal Corporation of Greater Bombay today to understand the environmental sensitivity of this project, implement the environmental management plan, and monitor that plan, and importantly, keep adapting that plan as we have lessons learned? Then surely we know that capacity is poor today at the municipal corporation, for whatever reasons, for managing environmental social issues of such a mammoth project. So this is the question in our mind again to be kept, that many times environmental management plans are not just physical measures, they have to include institutional strengthening component, so that we ensure that what has been said on paper is actually getting implemented, and after implementation, operated, so that we have the effectiveness of our mitigation measures to address those environmental social issues. Let's look at the types of projects which we deal with. And we use a process of screening and categorization. And screening means here that do we need to do an environmental assessment at all? And if we have to do, at what level of details that do we perform that environmental assessment? And we use this schema where we look at the type of project, the size of the project, the location of the project, all three at the same time, to say that this project actually is category A, very sensitive from environmental social perspective, or maybe category B, where we're saying it's moderate, or category C, where it is not that critical at all that we have to subject that project to a rigorous environmental assessment process. And this whole idea of screening and categorization is to decide on the focus, the level of details, and then the procedures to be followed. So like we have in our EI notification, certain projects are dealt at the central level because they are category A, and then some at the state level because we call them as category B1. And many financing institutions today use ABC terminology of category A, B, C, typically by World Bank or Asian Development Bank. So surely the first step is that if somebody comes to us with a development project, we want to know what category it is lying, and then accordingly we will have to apply the effort level, the level of details, depending on that category, right? So this is the first step. Coastal Road project is certainly a high sensitive project on environmental social front, so category A is what it would be. Now, if we keep looking at projects one after another, A, B, or C, you would realize that there is an approach, what we call as a programmatic environmental impact assessment, where what we essentially do is we now look at environmental social management plans in a prescriptive mode. And what it then means that if I were to look at a project which I want to replicate in the city or in the state at multiple locations, then I would decide how do I handle environmental social issues across all such projects at the same time in like a program. And that gives me an advantage to be consistent the way I will handle environmental and social issues, but I'll also have an opportunity to localize or customize the treatment of environmental social issues where this project is getting replicated. And in that process, I insert best practices.